Even if they were the same cost, I still prefer tight end Colston Loveland over Brock Bowers this season in fantasy. The fact that Loveland is going a couple rounds after Bowers in drafts is just the cherry on top.
Locked On NFL Big Board with Michelle Magdziuk is here to bring the lists, rankings, and analysis that true NFL fans crave all year long. From power rankings and draft prospects to top players and best bets, the Data Queen has you covered. Brought to you by Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome into the Locked On NFL Big Board. I'm your host, Michelle Magdziuk. On today's episode, I'm continuing my fantasy coverage. I've already done my top 10 fantasy quarterbacks, top 12 running backs, and wide receivers. So today I'll finish up with my top 10 fantasy tight ends for the 2026 season. My top three guys are not going to shock you, but the order I have them in might. Now, number one, which I think there is only one true answer unless you try to overthink it here, it has to be Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. But he is right now, his average draft position is tight end 2. So after Brock Bowers, who's going as tight end 1, you have to take McBride pretty early in drafts, though, still going as a late second round pick, 23rd overall among all positions. McBride and Bowers are the only two tight ends going top 40 in drafts. So they are a lot pricier than all other tight ends. But in terms of McBride, I totally understand, and I think he's worth it. Last year, tight end 1 overall. He averaged 14.9 fantasy points per game, more than 2 more points per game than any other tight end last year. And then the year prior in 2024, he was the tight end 3, and he did that with only 2 receiving touchdowns. Do you know how hard it is to be a tight end and finish that high with only 2 receiving touchdowns? Normally, tight ends live and die off of touchdowns, but not with McBride when he is such an important part of this Cardinals offense and gets so many targets from year to year. Looking at last year and his consistency, he was a top 5 fantasy tight end scorer in 9 weeks last year, top 8 in 12 weeks. And really, he didn't officially explode until after Kyler Murray went out and Jacoby Brissett came in, which, by the way, Jacoby Brissett is still the Cardinals' starting quarterback this year. With Jacoby Brissett last year from week 6 through 18, which is pretty much the entire season, right? A huge chunk of the season. He averaged 17.1 fantasy points per game and half PPR. That is insane. The next closest was Brock Bowers at 13.8 points per game in that span. So about 4 more points per game than anyone else. He averaged about 11 targets per game in that span, 80 receiving yards per game, and had 10 touchdowns. So yes, Jacoby Brissett loves him some Trey McBride. So I'm going to keep loving me some Trey McBride. Now at number 2, I know people are going to want Brock Bowers here, and I'm okay with it. Like, I'm okay if you want to take Bowers 1 or 2. I just personally don't have him here. I'm going to put Colston Loveland as my tight end 2 for this year. Right now, he's the tight end 3 in average draft position, 41st overall pick on average, so about a 4th round pick. He might be the best value in drafts considering that McBride and Bowers are going so much earlier. Loveland is coming into his 2nd season, and as a rookie, his career started off slow. Sure, most rookie tight ends don't get a ton of playing time and a bunch of targets, right? But then once he got a shot, once Cole Kmet went down for a little bit and he showed what he can do, Colston Loveland finished the second half of the year just absolutely electric. He was the tight end 4 and average points per game from weeks 9 through 18 among tight ends who play at least 3 games. He averaged 11.9 points per game in that span, behind only Trey McBride, Kittle, and Bowers. And then he continued it in the playoffs. I mean, that huge wild card game against the Packers was crazy when he had 15 targets for 8 receptions, 137 yards. But listen to these last 4 games of his rookie season. In week 17, 10 targets, 6 receptions, 94 yards, and a touchdown. Week 18, 13 targets, 10 receptions, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Wildcard round, 15 targets, 8 receptions, 137 yards. And then that divisional round against the Rams, a bit tougher of a matchup. Still 10 targets, 4 receptions, 56 yards. This man just showed how insane he can be. Like, these are not numbers. The 94 yards, 137 yards, these are not numbers tight ends typically put up. Loveland has shown that he can be special already as a rookie. So can Brock Bowers. We'll get there. But I trust the Bears offense more. I trust Ben Johnson right now going into this year. They move on from DJ Moore. They already have injuries to Luther Burden. Roma Dunze's had trouble staying healthy. I think Colston Loveland could be the top target on this team. I mean, Loveland already led the Bears in receptions, receiving yards, and tied for the most receiving touchdowns last year as a rookie tight end, despite not getting super involved in the offense until about week 8. So yeah, I think Loveland is the tight end 2 on my board and probably the best price in the entire draft for tight ends. Now at number 3, this is where Brock Bowers comes in. And his average draft position right now is tight end 1 off fantasy drafts. Most fantasy drafts, Brock Bowers is the first tight end to go. 18th overall, mid-second round pick. Now, since he's my tight end 3, I'm not going to have him in any leagues because he's too pricey for me. Do I think he's going to disappoint? No, like he's going to be fine. He's going to be good as long as he stays healthy, which was, something that fantasy managers had to deal with last year. But I think he doesn't have any more injury concerns compared to anyone else. He was a tight end 4 on average last year. So even taking out the games he didn't play, he averaged 12 fantasy points per game in the games he did play. That ranked tight end 4 behind McBride, Tucker Kraft, and George Kittle. He was one of 4 tight ends to score more than 10 fantasy points per game in half PPR last year. And that came with a slow start to the season. He was battling with a knee injury pretty much all year long that he suffered in week 1. And as a rookie in 2024, we saw him be the tight end 1, tight end 2 on average with 12.2 points per game. So over his first 2 seasons in the NFL, he has averaged the 3rd most points per game among all tight ends, behind only Trey McBride and George Kittle. And the Raiders really have a lack of weapons there, right? Like they've been looking okay, these younger guys in the preseason at wide receiver. It does seem like Clint Kubiak likes to utilize wide receivers in his offense, but maybe it's just because the Seahawks and the Saints, didn't have any great tight ends to lean on like the Raiders do. I do think Brock Bowers will lead the Raiders in targets, in receptions, in receiving yards, and probably touchdowns. It's just how many touchdowns are there going to be to go around with Kirk Cousins or Fernando Mendoza as your quarterbacks this year? Once Mendoza gets going and is coming into his 2nd year, I'll be maybe higher on Brock Bowers, or maybe he'll make me look super stupid this year and ball out no matter who's back there. And I just trust the Bears and Ben Johnson and even Caleb Williams to be able to support Colston Loveland to more fantasy points than I do with Brock Bowers' situation right now. And I think both guys can be the focal point of their offense. So that's why I have Loveland 1 spot ahead of him. And with McBride, I mean, you're just hoping these guys can get the workload that McBride does and the production that McBride does. So I'm sticking with McBride number 1 for sure. Now, my number 4 tight end may shock you because he is going much later in drafts, coming off an Achilles tear. And he is aging, but I don't care. When he's out in the field, he is a dominant fantasy tight end. So I am still keeping him at tight end 4, and that's Mr. George Kittle. I'll get to that next in the rest of my rankings. Up next on the Locked On NFL Big Board, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent. It's about having everyone working together towards the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. We saw the Rams this year. They were looking solid already to go to the Super Bowl, but this team as a whole decided we want to make a big move going to trade for Myles Garrett. And you could tell it wasn't a reactionary move. The organization had a vision, stuck to it, and now they're even more likely to see the results they're searching for, which is winning that Super Bowl, because everyone in that organization and on that roster was on the same page, working from the same playbook. Great organizations win because operations matter. And that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's ODOO.com/lockedon. Coming in at tight end 4 in my fantasy rankings for 2026 is Mr. George Kittle of the 49ers. He is going all the way in the 9th round in average draft position right now. Tight end 9, 101st overall among all positions. I get it. He's getting older and he's coming off an Achilles tear from the postseason. But it seems like it was the best case Achilles tear. He seems like he's on track and good to go to maybe not be there week 1, but only because they have to travel all the way to Australia. I do think he's not going to be put on the PUP list. I do think he's going to be here by week 2 at the latest. And this guy every year is dominant in fantasy. He was a tight end 3 last year in fantasy points per game. The year prior, tight end 1. Year prior to that, tight end 5. Year prior to that, tight end 2. I can keep going. Tight end 4, tight end 3, tight end 2, tight end 3. Those are all of his finishes in average points per game since 2018. Over his career, George Kittle has averaged 11.4 fantasy points per game in half PPR. That's the 3rd most in NFL history among all tight ends to play at least 60 games in the NFL, behind only Rob Gronkowski and Travis Kelce. And even looking at last year, like since he's gotten Brock Purdy, he has been way more consistent than what he was before Brock Purdy. And looking at last year, he finished as a top 8 fantasy tight end scorer in 7 of 11 games played, top 6 in 6 games played, and top 3 in 3 of his 11 games played. And one of those games where he finished top 8, he played 1 drive. And that was in week 1. He played 1 drive before getting injured and having to miss some time. And he was still finished as a top 8 fantasy scorer in that game. Yes, he'll be 33 years old in October, but if he's out there, I'm drafting him until he shows me that the wheels have just fallen off and he can't do it anymore. But I still think George Kittle has another good year in him, and I am taking him in the 9th round always, but I'm going to rank him as my tight end 4. Doesn't mean to take him as the 4th tight end off the board. You can take him later, but that's where I'm going to have him ranked for this year. At tight end 5, I have 2nd-year Colts tight end Tyler Warren. He is tight end 4 in average draft position, 5th round pick on average. Last year, as a rookie, started off very, very strong. He was a tight end 3 overall in fantasy points scored from weeks 1 through 13. He did start to really struggle to score without Daniel Jones there in the final 5 weeks. Jones got hurt in the middle of the week 14 game, but when you look at weeks 1 through 13 and what Tyler Warren was doing, he was averaging 6.5 targets per game, had 57 receiving yards per game, 11.8 yards per reception, had 4 receiving touchdowns during that time, and averaged 10.7 fantasy points per game in half PPR. Now, weeks 14 through 18, the targets didn't go down. They were right there staying the same at 6.8, but his receiving yards per game cut in half. His yards per reception went all the way down to 7.4. He caught 0 touchdowns the rest of the way and only averaged 4.5 fantasy points per game. So he really struggled with the backup quarterbacks. But even with those struggles to end the year, he still led the Colts in targets last year as a rookie tight end with 112 targets. And the guy second up, Michael Pittman Jr. with 111 targets, he's no longer on the team. He was traded to the Steelers. Now, Keenan Allen did get added. Maybe he can take all of Michael Pittman's targets, but I still think Tyler Warren's going to be the main target in this offense. I think he's going to lead the Colts in targets again, maybe even can have more than he did this last year. The touchdowns have to go up, 4 touchdowns last year, but again, he was on pace for a lot more than that when Daniel Jones was there. Tyler Warren's a special tight end, really talented receiver. I think we got to see glimpses of that to start his career, and it's only going to improve moving forward. So Tyler Warren, he's not on such an exciting offense like Colston Loveland is, so that's why Warren's a little bit lower, but I still think he's going to be necessary for this team and come through at his current draft cost for sure. Coming in at number 6 is another 2nd-year tight end, really good tight end draft class in 2025. It's Browns tight end Harold Fannin Jr. He is currently going as the tight end 8, so I do have him a bit ahead, or a couple spots ahead of his ADP. You can take him normally in about the 7th round, which is actually a pretty big gap between the other top tight ends from this 2025 draft class, and Colston Loveland going 43rd overall and Tyler Warren going 59th overall in average draft position. And I would feel much stronger about this take, I think, if it was Shedeur Sanders, because Fannin's production, like his strong production, did come with Shedeur Sanders at the end of last year. the team did announce it's going to be Deshaun Watson, but I do think Harold Fannin Jr. has all the skill set to be a top end receiving tight end. He led the Browns in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns last year as a rookie. And he actually averaged the most fantasy points per game among all the rookie tight ends last year. He finished as a tight end 8 on average with 9.4 points per game. And like I said, he did come on strong at the end of the year, though, once Sanders came in. Sanders made his first start in week 12. Fannin Jr. averaged 12.3 fantasy points per game in that span with Sanders. He was a tight end 4 in average scoring from weeks 12 through 17. He didn't play in week 18 with a groin injury. Only McBride, Kittle, and Kyle Pitts scored more fantasy points per game than Harold Fannin Jr. did from weeks 12 through 17. Now you have David Njoku gone too. So this is just Harold Fannin Jr.'s team for the tight end room. He doesn't have to compete with snaps with the veteran anymore. And yeah, they added some wide receivers, rookies there. Maybe they can utilize them a bit more, but Harold Fannin showed last year why he should be targeted so much. And truly, I know Deshaun Watson was named the starter. I don't think that lasts very long. I think Shedeur Sanders will be out there again this season. So even if the connection between Watson and Harold Fannin isn't as strong, Sanders is going to be out there at some point. Probably it's not going to take too long once the Browns start losing a bunch of games. Now at number 7, I'm going with old man Mark Andrews to bounce back. Last year was not pretty for him. He was a tight end 24 last season, by far his worst season. He had just 48 receptions for 422 yards and 5 touchdowns. But prior to that, even in 2024, that was a down year for him. He was a tight end 7, and that's where I have him right now. But each of the years prior to 2024, he finished as a tight end 4 or better. He was a tight end 4 in 2019, then tight end 4, then tight end 1, then tight end 3, then tight end 4 in 2023. He is still only 30 years old. It's not like he's a super old tight end. 30 years old is not very old for a tight end. And now he gets a new OC and Declan Doyle, and that worked out for McBride last year. And Andrews, despite him struggling so much last season, he still had the second most targets on the Ravens last year behind only Zay Flowers. And the biggest thing here is the team moving on from Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely goes to the Giants, and then also Charlie Collier. He goes to the Chargers. So this is Mark Andrews' team again. He should be getting way more snaps than he's been seeing the last couple of years. And he's going to be needed on this team. Zay Flowers, sure, some of their younger wide receivers are getting some hype in training camp, but Mark Andrews should still be the second target on this team. And he's especially going to be needed in the red zone. So I think his touchdowns go right back up. He was at 11 in 2024. I think that's in the realm of possibility. He's been a big touchdown scorer throughout his career. So I think he can score double-digit touchdowns again this year. I think he'll be more involved in the offense without Isaiah Likely there. And he has a nice bounce-back year in his 30-year-old season. I have 3 more tight ends to get to finish up my top 10 fantasy list. Number 8 is Kyle Pitts, but I'm getting a little worried about his quarterback situation. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Less time, less stress, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on the Locked On NFL Big Board Show. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, coming in at number 8 for my fantasy tight end rankings is Falcons tight end Kyle Pitts. 1 spot lower than his average draft position at tight end 7, typically going around the 7th round. The thing with Kyle Pitts is that he's been highly inconsistent in his career, right? Has not been a big touchdown scorer. Although if he continues to trend in his touchdowns, he should be scoring 6 touchdowns this year because he scored 1 in his first year, 2 in his second year, 3 in his third year, 4 in his fourth year, and 5 in his fifth year. So now it's time for him to score 6 touchdowns. Now, a couple more years from now, he's going to be a fantastic fantasy tight end once we can get up there to 8, 9, 10 touchdowns. But in general, he should be the second most targeted guy on this Falcons team, right? Like Drake London's going to be the top guy. After that, Bijan's going to get his targets too. But Kyle Pitts last year did lead this team in targets with 118. Drake London did miss 5 games. And I will say a lot of Kyle Pitts' biggest games did come when Drake London was out. He had a 40-point game when he was out, and that was one of just 3 games last year that Kyle Pitts scored more than 12 fantasy points all season long. He did have 8 games last year with 5 or fewer points, 11 games with 9 or fewer points, and 5 of his 6 games that he scored at least 10 fantasy points last year came when Drake London was not playing. If you even just take out that 140-point game, which I know isn't fair, but that's just not something he's going to be able to put up when he had 143 yards and 2 receiving touchdowns in that game. That's not a realistic thing. Taking out that 1 week, he averaged 7.9 fantasy points per game in all the other weeks he played. That's the same amount of points as Brenton Strange scored last year, and he was the tight end 17 on the season. That was fewer than guys like Dalton Schultz and Juwan Johnson and Darren Waller scored last year. Also, pretty much all of Kyle Pitts' best games last year also came with Kirk Cousins at quarterback, and he's no longer on the team. So we haven't got to see a great connection between Pitts and Michael Penix Jr., and we don't know what Tua is going to look like out there because it hasn't looked pretty so far. If it is Tua, I mean, we've seen him connect with tight ends before. I mean, on short routes, right? With Jonnu Smith getting so many short receptions. Darren Waller was a pretty good touchdown scorer there for a hot second with Tua. I am not thrilled to take Kyle Pitts, but I do think at the end of the year, he can have a couple big performances to get him to tight end 8, right? I just don't think it's going to be a fun situation to be playing him week in and week out. At number 9 is Tucker Kraft, and this is a hard one, right? Because if he was healthy, this would be a lot easier. But he's coming off the ACL tear that happened in November, and he says, like, you know, he should be okay, and he's looking like he could be ready to start the year. But he did also say that the team might monitor its snaps and kind of limit him until halfway through the season. That makes it scary to draft him in fantasy. He was the tight end 2 last year in fantasy points per game. He played 8 games last year, averaged 12.7 fantasy points per game in those games before tearing his ACL. He had a couple monster games, week 2 and week 8, with over 120 receiving yards in both those games with 3 touchdowns over that span. The rest of the games weren't huge. So again, it's going to be up and down with him. But they did lose weapons this year, and Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks. And we know Christian Watson has trouble staying healthy. So does Jaden Reed. Matthew Golden hasn't proven anything yet. So Tucker Kraft, they might want to limit his snaps, but will they be able to? And I do think if he's out there healthy, he will get a lot of targets in this offense. But due to the injury, due to maybe limiting snaps, due to not knowing just how he's going to be utilized in this offense, and last year being his first big breakout year, I'm going to keep him at tight end 9. I do think he is a bit risky to draft this year. And to finish us off here is Travis Kelce at tight end 10, which is exactly his ADP right now. He's going the 10th tight end off the board, 109th overall among all positions. He's returning for his 14th NFL season. He will be 37 years old in October. He's definitely slowing down. He has definitely hit father time. These last 2 years, he's been the tight end 9 and the tight end 8, averaging pretty much the same points per game both years, 9.1 and 9.2. But still last year, he led the Chiefs in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and tied for the most receiving touchdowns on the team. He's back with a new contract with the Chiefs and possibly the old school offense with Eric Bieniemy. Matt Nagy's finally gone, right? Could they get that electric offense back with Bieniemy there? There's still questions about Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. Like, can Rice stay healthy and stay out there? Worthy has not stepped up as their first round wide receiver they're expecting to get. They had some veterans leave the wide receiver room this year too. So the targets are just still going to be there for Travis Kelce. The touchdowns have gone down incredibly since 2022. These last 3 years, I mean, he only has 13 total receiving touchdowns over 3 years combined. He had 12 in 2022. After that, it was 5 in 2023, 3 in 2024, and 5 in 2025. Those touchdowns are really been what's killing him. Yeah, the efficiency's gone down a bit, but the targets are still there, and he can still be a huge part of this offense. If he can catch 8 to 9 targets, he's going to kill his ADP, and people are going to be very happy to have him. But if he's still around that 5 mark, I think he stays, as tight end 9, tight end 10. And it's hard to predict those are going to go up when it's been 3 straight seasons now. Now, one guy I didn't list here, who you might be asking, where is he? Sam Laporta, I would put him at 11. He is very good, but he needs to stay healthy, and he's already hurt again this offseason. And he's in a stacked offense too, right? Like I like fantasy tight ends where they can be the top target of their offense if things go right. And that's really not the case with the Lions. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's amazing. They have Jameson Williams, a great wide receiver too. They have Jahmyr Gibbs, an amazing receiving running back, right? So he can be the third or fourth tight end on this team, even if he is fully healthy. And since his rookie year, he's just been kind of a disappointment. So I'm going to put him at tight end 11 because I'm worried now about injuries again. He needs to stay healthy. I don't think he's a terrible pick. I couldn't get him into my top 10 for this year. But that is it for today's episode. I will continue to do some more fantasy coverage for the rest of this week to help you get prepped for your fantasy drafts. Go check out the Locked On Fantasy Football Show with Marcus Mosher and Fabs. Great show over there. They can help you prep for your draft as well and win your fantasy leagues this season. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. Bye, y'all.